Welcome to the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. I'm Will Haycox, and joining me is my co-host, Gabe O'Sullivan. We are men who've suffered the loss of a child, and through this production we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. What's up, Gabe? How you doing, man?
Great, brother. Good morning. So we are continuing on with this series of Who Understands My Pain, and we've covered the fact over the past couple episodes that God definitely understands our pain, and we went through that. So make sure you go back and listen to the last two episodes to kind of get yourself caught up on this train of thought. And now we're going to get into the point that there are other guys out there who have been through what you've been through, and that they also understand your pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is episode 20. And we're excited to just continue recording this for you guys. We hope that you're enjoying it. Like you said, Gabe, we started this series, Does Anyone Understand My Pain? With God Understands My Pain. And we spent 2 episodes going over that. We could probably spend 20 episodes going over that. But now here in the second part of the series, we're going to go over other men who've been through the same loss of a child. Know your pain too. And this really goes right to the heart of why we're doing this podcast, and we kind of told that story in episode 1. If you want to go back and listen to that, it was the why. But seeking out others who felt the death of a child is something that I think definitely helped me. I know everyone's personality is different, and some people may not be as open or as willing to, I guess, bear their emotions to another guy or to anyone, even their wife. But for some reason, that's the way I'm wired. And so, after we lost our son, I was pretty intentional about, talking to people at our church and trying to find some guys that had been through this same loss. And I didn't have to go far, because I think there were 2 or 3 couples that the husbands came to me at the hospital or texted me when we were at the hospital. And then Gabe and some other guys from our church here in Spartanburg reached out within a few weeks, and none of them were pushy. They just kind of said, hey, we're here for you if you ever need anything. And they either directly said, we've been through the same loss, or they just mentioned, we might have some things to talk about, like I've talked about. One guy said to me, but I think that's from our side, from the side that we've been a few years or several years in Gabe's case here, removed from the loss of children. I think I don't know if I'd quite go to the point of responsibility, because everyone has their own gifts from God. But I think that's a beautiful ministry that you could have to people who are newer in this loss. And from you who are newer in the loss, I think it's a healthy practice to seek out guys who have been through this and can kind of help you through the weeks and months following the loss of a child. So just to quickly run over the purpose of our podcast, because it is directly applicable to what we're talking about here. Purpose of the podcast and of Gabe's book are just to be a resource for you, the listener. And I guess Gabe's book is not as particularly targeted towards men. It's it would make sense. I've read it. My wife's read it. My parents have read it. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you find it. That will be done, and you get it, you read it, because it's helpful in the sense that a lot of things that Gabe talks about and he went through with the loss of his children makes sense. And I went through the same feelings, and you have the same questions and struggles, but then Gabe takes the time to explain some of the, I guess you don't make it as technical as a theology book, but you have a lot of truth in there, biblical truth of this is how God helped me through this, and this is what I came and I discovered through the loss of our children and dealing with it and praying through it. And you're very open and honest and vulnerable in that book. So I think if you're not ready to reach out and talk to anyone yet, you should certainly grab Gabe's book and listen to that or read that. But really, the reason that Gabe put that book down and the reason that the Lord laid on our hearts to do this podcast is that we want to connect with you through these means, to pray with you, pray for you, and to encourage you to draw closer to the Lord. And I don't think I don't know if Gabe and I have had this particular conversation, but I can say pretty confidently that Gabe didn't throw that book together to get famous or to get rich. And I don't know about your situation, Gabe, but if you did, I don't think it worked because you're still here in Spartanburg.
Yeah,
You're not living in New
that's
York
true.
or Los Angeles.
And I still have not recouped the money that I spent to actually get that book put together. And that Joker's been out for 9 years. So yeah. Still.
And then the same thing for this podcast. We didn't throw this together for the money, and if we did, we're not doing so great. The purpose of this podcast and the purpose of Gabe's book, like we said, is to help you, the listener and the reader, to work through your grief and to draw closer to the Lord and heal from the death of your child, and just to be, like we said, another resource out there. So, us as men who've been through the loss of a child have done the best we can to this point to be resources and to create resources for you. And I think this is how Gabe and I met, and hopefully this could be a story for you as someone further from your loss, that the Lord would strengthen you and equip you to be a resource for someone newer to the loss. And hopefully this could be a story for you who are newer to the loss, to seek out or to be presented with the person who is more experienced. But after the death of our son Gabriel, Gabe and a handful of other men from our church reached out to me and made themselves available to talk. And I'm blessed that they were willing to speak with me. But this was only possible because Hannah and I made ourselves available and were willing to discuss our feelings and to be open and vulnerable, and I didn't go on the side of the road or anything with a sign that said, "We just lost our child, come and talk to me." But I think I just wanted to say here that since men are notoriously self-sufficient, if you've lost a child and either you're not super involved in church or you're just in a really big church like Gabe and I are, it would be easy to kind of get lost in the background. And if you don't make it a point to either seek out that help and that conversation, or you are not receiving the suggestions or the offers of help, then you may give the impression that either you don't want to talk about it and you're not willing to hear what other people have to say, or people may just assume oh, well, he's dealt with it, so there's no reason for me to talk to him. And if people get that impression from you, then they might think the most respectful thing to do in that situation is just continue acting normal around you and never bring up your child, never offer to help. And that can lead to resentment and frustration from you. And you're like, hey, all my friends know what happened. How come they're not talking to me? And I can't speak from the woman's side of things, but from a man, I have some friends who've been through miscarriage or infant loss, and they just don't really seem like they want to talk about it, or we have talked and they don't want to continue that conversation. So even though I'm very open about the loss of our child, I'm kind of uncomfortable bringing that up around them because I don't want to make them uncomfortable and make it worse. So I want to put that out as a disclaimer that don't be silent and I don't want to say mean, but don't present yourself like you don't want to talk about it and then be mad at people when they don't talk to you about it. Be open and receptive if that's something that you do want is someone to speak into your life and encourage you. Gabe, can you?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. Too? I mean, I was the opposite of Will. I was the opposite of you, man. I did not want to talk about it. I just wanted to internalize it. Shut it down, not act like it didn't happen, but I just didn't want to deal with those. I guess I didn't want to necessarily deal with the emotions, and so I didn't reach out to anybody, and I had a dude reached out to me, one of my pastors at church. I mentioned this before, and he made me go to lunch with him. We went down the street here to Wild Wings every other Wednesday or something like that for lunch, and would eat, and I hated every minute of it because he would make me talk about, how am I doing emotionally? How am I doing spiritually? How are me and my wife doing? And I didn't like talking about it because I felt uncomfortable and I didn't know what to say, and I was still in such pain, emotionally, spiritually, and but it was so good, like looking back on it. I mean, it was so good that I got that stuff out there, that I got it out. It's kind of like holding in a sneeze. You don't hold in a sneeze, man. You gotta let that sneeze out, and that was the same way. So again, you may be like Will, or you may be like me, but both of us are saying the same thing, which is you need to talk to some other dudes that can comfort you and that can be there with you, and it can be even a sounding board, just for you to get some of that off of your chest and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And yeah, I was, Will, you mentioned a minute ago about how you could have some resentment towards your friends if they don't bring it up and if they try to act like everything's normal. And I was kind of that way. I wouldn't say necessarily resentment, but kind of disillusionment, because here I'd gone through this difficult time, or even when I was going through it, and some guys that, had been friends with since elementary school and talked, every week, or texted every week, or played basketball with every week, or whatever. Man, I didn't hear from them. I mean, it was like they ghosted me, during that whole time period. And yeah, I mean, I definitely got, and even afterwards too, it's like, okay, now I've gone through this most difficult time of my life. The dudes that I thought were my best friends in the world, I'm not hearing from at all. It's like crickets, like they're not calling me, they're not checking on me. It was nothing, nothing, no communication, and so it was me, my wife, and then this one pastor that was, talking to me. And, man, in that time, honestly, your parents are going to try to be there for you, but, like when you kind of get to that stage of life where you're married and got a wife and, gone through that, it's kind of hard to talk to your parents about that stuff. You're kind of looking for a friend a lot of times, and it's just the way it is. So my parents were great. They were there for me if I wanted to talk to them, but they hadn't gone through this either, so they didn't know what the heck to say. And my friends too, they didn't know what to say, and so they just didn't say anything. So they didn't even call in, they didn't do anything. And I know that because later, years later, each of these guys that I'm thinking about came to me and was like, man, I'm really sorry that I didn't reach out to you. I'm really sorry that I didn't check on you. But the fact is, I just didn't know what to say, because I didn't know what was going on either. And I didn't know what I had to offer you, so I just kept silent, and again, that's certainly, I think, kind of a fault of men. It's like, we'll just gloss over it and not deal with it, and then it'll go away, right? I mean, how many times have you probably felt that way with your relationship with your wife? You get in a fight, and you're just like, I'll just forget about it tomorrow morning, it'll be fine. I was watching Scarface last night, she'll take another Quaalude and call me in the morning, that kind of thing. That's kind of what and love me in the morning, I think that's what he says. So that's kind of the way we deal with it, right? And that's not a healthy way to deal with it, honestly. Obviously, things didn't work out so well for Tony Montana at the end of that movie, so for multiple other reasons. But I think any podcast where you reference Scarface, that's a good one right there. Yeah. Maybe we can put that in the hashtag, or get some more interest in that. Get some more follows or something funny. Like that. I don't know. And so yeah, make the effort, right? Make the effort to reach out, or when somebody tries to reach out to you, don't push them away, is what we're saying. Like, realize they're coming at it hopefully from a place of sincerity, and you'll know if they're coming from a place of sincerity, or if they're just nosy, and if they're nosy, screw them, man, forget those guys, don't. I remember we were in a small group Bible study one time, and this one dude in our group was going through a real tough situation, like divorce situation, and with his wife, and this, I hate to say it, was the guy in our group, man, he was probing, but you could just tell it wasn't for the right reasons, and I just remember being so angry at this dude, and they had to just like get him to shut up, and but you realize if the guy's being sincere and genuine, and if so, let that dude into your life to be able to be that sounding board. Yeah. It will be very therapeutic for you to get that off your chest.
Yeah, I don't think I can reiterate that enough. Like, that's one of the things I have down here. Like, don't take people not coming up to you to talk as indifference, like specifically your friends. because just like you said, like a lot of your friends who haven't been through this have no idea what to say or how to comfort you. So they probably feel like it's weird and awkward and not helpful to bring it up, and maybe it'll mess your friendship up, or maybe it'll just, like you said, guys are just like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's weird. I think of, like, you referenced Scarface. I'm gonna reference like Talladega Nights, where he's like doing the interview and he's like, I don't know what to do with my hands, and his hands are up there in the air, and he looks like an idiot. And he puts his hand down, and his hands come back up when he talks, and it's kind of like, when you're into those conversations, you're like, I don't know what to do. So it's like, it's weird and it's awkward. Yes. And so if your friends don't bring it up, yeah, like you said, you might have some friends who are just like skin flints, who really don't have much depth to them, and they've just been friends with you just out of convenience. But probably most of your friends, especially if they're good friends and you've had good conversations about other things, just aren't comfortable bringing up that subject unless either you bring it up first, or unless they're really praying about it, seeking the Lord, and they feel moved to have that conversation with you. But I guess I wanted to ask you, Gabe, since I guess I did this from the standpoint of, like you said, my like seeking out that conversation and that relationship to talk to someone else about it. Can you speak maybe quickly to how did you, when say someone else is in that same position where like they're dealing with it, they're a month out, they're 6 months out, and they haven't talked to anybody, they're internalizing everything, and someone grabs them and drags them out, and they're like, hey man, you need to talk about this. Like, if you weren't as kind and loving of a guy you are, then like I could see where you could easily be like, nah man, like leave me alone. Like, I don't want to talk, or getting mad or yelling or just like freezing that person out. Can you speak to how did you get to the point where you were comfortable like going, or maybe not even comfortable, but you were willing to go and have that conversation? And like, did it come down to like this guy had to build up a relationship with you first to have the right to come to you and drag you to lunch and talk? Or like how would you counsel someone who doesn't want to talk about it, but through this podcast maybe they've had the thought, I probably should talk to someone?
Man, that's great. So first of all, yes, that pastor, we had a relationship. We had been buddies for a while. Mm-hmm. And so we had hung out at each other's houses, had families over for cookouts and that kind of thing. So we had a relationship, and I knew he cared for me, as a friend, because we were friends. We still are friends, and so that was helpful, And so I knew that he really had my best interest in heart, and he didn't want to see me, just tank, because of this, or my wife, or our relationship, or whatever, or my relationship with the Lord. And so that was good. And so I was, even though I wasn't receptive to talking about it, I would. I wouldn't be like angry about it. I would be like, oh man, I gotta go to lunch with him again. I know he's gonna make me talk about this stuff, kind of thing. And that was tough, but I think deep down, like I recognize, like I need to talk about this, right? And so it was almost probably I was going to almost appease him because I knew he was trying to help me, and I was like, okay, I'll go, because I just knew deep down I needed to talk about it, And so I think realizing that even if you're resistant to it, that just know deep down you need to talk about it. And so that being said, if you're feeling that anger, or that anxiousness, or that that wall is up, like let it down, and that might take you some time to let it down, but you got to let it down, and be willing. Yeah, I never reached out. The only person I ever reached out to was our lead pastor. And one time, and then that was out of desperation, because we had been wrestling with this, like, kind of why did this happen, for a while, and like why would God allow something this tragic to happen to His kids, us, that we felt like we were truly following Him, right? And so we were still in that mentality that if I do this, then God will do this for me, right? Mentality, which is not biblical. And so we were trying to figure that out. Again, I've said before, I came up in that Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, mindset of just do the right thing, and you're going to be blessed immeasurably than you can ask or imagine, in every way that you think you should be blessed. And obviously a way for us was we felt like God blessed us with these triplet girls, and that was an amazing blessing. Okay, but why did they get taken from us? The kind of thing. So the only person, and so we finally reached, that was the only person I ever reached out to, the only man I ever reached out to ask for some clarification there, and that was out of desperation, because I was literally to the end of my spiritual rope. It was like, okay, either I figure this thing out, or my faith is futile, and everything that I believed, up until this point was useless and worthless. Yeah. And I had to figure that out, because deep down I didn't feel like that was the truth, but my current circumstances were telling me that was the truth, and I was kind of ready just to be like, forget all this, kind of thing. And then, so it was out of desperation, and that I finally got there. And so I would encourage guys listening to don't wait till you get to that point of desperation when you're ready to throw up your hands and wash your hands of faith, or wash your hands of your life, or whatever the craziness you might be going through your mind. Like, don't wait, listen to this podcast, read my book, and then reach out to other guys. And even before I was ready to reach out, I was journaling. That was really therapeutic for me too, because I was able to get those thoughts down, those questions down, on paper, and get them out before I even went and would talk to somebody. So if you're not ready to talk to somebody, which we highly recommend that you do, then at least journal, and then again, like Will said earlier, like, reach out to us on Messenger, on email, whatever. Like, this morning before this podcast, we took some time and prayed for some guys and their families who have reached out to us, through this. So, like, we're not just saying that we're going to do that. We did it this morning, and we'll continue to pray for those dudes that reached out to us. So, you just got to be willing to open yourself up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more we could say on this topic, and I think we probably will go into more of the nuances and the particular reasons why we should talk, and why as men maybe our machismo and our, like, I'm big and tough and I can't talk, can't admit weakness is not a good thing. But just to sum up what we talked about here, and to keep these episodes short and easy to digest here, I think, like we talked about, I'm coming from the perspective of, I wanted to talk, I wanted to work it out. I felt like, if I talk about it, it'll be easier for me to deal with it. And Gabe, you came from the point of, like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't know, how to express myself. It's uncomfortable. It makes me sad. I don't want to deal with it. And having to be dragged to the point where you do, both of us came to the same realization, the same point, that, like, when you do talk about it, when you get good godly advice, which that's maybe I think we should stress, that, like, don't go talk to a psychic reader about this. Like, talk to people in your church, people in your community, reach out to a pastor, a family member who you trust, that this is something that will help you deal with the loss of your child. And hopefully, like we said, if you're talking to someone who's a believer and knows the truth about the Lord, that you will be pushed closer to him just through opening up and being willing to talk and have someone else help you work through your pain. So we appreciate you listening to this episode. And guys, Gabe, will you take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go, I'm gonna because of what you just said, don't talk to a psychic reader. I'm gonna reference another Talladega Nights. This is where he gets in that wreck. Ricky Bobby gets in that wreck, and he's like, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Oprah, help me, Tom Cruise." Yeah. All right, whatever. So I love that movie. All right, so thank y'all for joining us today. Make sure you follow the Lost Boys and Found Fathers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can look for my book on Amazon. Just search "Thy Will Be Done" book. Put a question mark at the end of that, or just search "Thy Will Be Done" actually with the question mark at the end of that, and then my name. It'll come up there. So thank y'all for joining us today. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.